Hey, everybody. Al and Dan here, ready for the first episode of building a Web3 application, our favorite way of building a Web3 application with Scaffold Alchemy. So, super excited to jump on into this. Al, would you like to say any intro words?
I think you covered it really clearly. No, I'm just super excited to be here. I think the breakdown, just as an FYI, is gonna be like we're gonna share a couple slides describing Web3 app development flows, and why Scaffold Alchemy is awesome to use for Web3 development. And other than that, a little kind of demo at the end, right? And we're on our way.
Yeah. So we'll start off with Al doing a presentation here, talking about Scaffold Alchemy, talking about Web3 application development in general, and then we'll do some coding. So the goal today is to show you Scaffold Alchemy in its broadest sense to understand how the application works. And then the next two episodes, we're going to be diving into pushing into production, best practices, and then looking at the different things that you can build with it today. So super excited to dive into this. So yeah, Al, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and present and we'll jump on into it.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. All right, let's see. I'm gonna go ahead and present. Let's share my screen. Okay. And let me know if you can see us.
There we
Yeah.
are.
All right. Always fun to be in that little vortex. All right. So I'm gonna do, as we mentioned, a couple of slides, kind of introing some basic concepts. We hope that this kind of these 3 videos become useful to aspiring Web3 developers, veteran Web3 developers, beginner Web3 developers of any kind, or if you are not a developer yet, maybe this is your first intro. We are hoping that this covers, a wide array. And that's why we're going to kind of touch on basic concepts just initially and real quick, and then show you a little coding at the end, as mentioned. And then the next 2 videos will kind of just expand on what we cover here. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to hide this. It's always annoying to see. All right. So let's jump right in. Web3 application development. We're going to cover some basic concepts, and we want to show you one of our favorite ways of doing Web3 application development, which is using Scaffold Alchemy. There are many ways and many awesome tools, but we'll kind of cover like in favor and theme this in Scaffold Alchemy because we do believe this is the best and most efficient and most fun way to develop Web3 applications. All right. So kind of like a quick kickoff. What even is Web3, right? There might be folks here watching this like, okay, I saw some Web3 thing. Like, what even is Web3? So like a quick kind of attempt at defining this like Web3 term is these like Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, these nomenclatures are just attempts at timestamping the evolution of internet technologies, right? Because, back in the 90s, you had like this like, and I have a table for this on the next slide to really show this and hammer this home, but like the internet as a like interactive technology has evolved in this like read, write, own pattern, and that's supposed to map evenly to Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. So like to further expand on this Web 3, right? When someone says I'm a Web 3 developer, they're really saying I'm familiar with software development that leverages blockchains and smart contracts. When a company says we want to attract Web 2 developers to learn about Web 3, they mean we want to attract traditional developers that know how to write code and interact with databases, and we want them to learn about blockchains and smart contracts. And for example, Alchemy, we are DevRel people at Alchemy. They say Alchemy is a Web3 development platform, which means Alchemy is a platform to build apps powered by blockchains and smart contracts. So hopefully this hammers home a little bit more on the Web3 side of things. I know I'm leaving the Web 1 and Web 2 like a little bit uncovered for now, but I do have like a little bit of a table. This is what I meant by like this like evolutionary or like an attempt at like mapping or timestamping these like internet technologies, right? We had Web 1 all the way back to like Netscape and Yahoo and MSN, which was like very read. It was like one to all, and just reading off the description here, apps enabled one-way information transfers. So apps were primarily static. They were not interactive. And then Web 2 came along, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all these apps that we use a lot nowadays. And they said, let's make this a little bit more two-way. So they enabled social interaction. So now you get chats, commenting, you can follow people. The services are typically centralized and the users are locked in. So there's little to no composability. And I will show a little graphic that I created to really touch on that composability concept. And then we have Web3. It kind of like merges everything. You can read, you can write, and you can own. You have some platforms like Aave, Uniswap, and OpenSea, which are like very Web3 specific platforms. But these apps enabled the composable layer, which is powered by smart contracts and blockchains. So users can truly own their data and assets. They can, you know, in Web3 apps, you can own your assets. You can use a Web3 app today and then take your assets to another Web3 app tomorrow. That's composability. And this read, write, own kind of pattern, the read, write comes from forms of communicating with APIs, right? You have like read APIs or write APIs, like write, like get and post. It comes from that concept, just as an FYI. I do have this like little Figma jam I put together, hoping it loads. Yeah, so it's not the best, but this is like a quick flow of Web 2. You have Facebook, and you have a user, and they log in via user@account.com, and Facebook, and they use Facebook, and awesome, like, right? Facebook interacts with their own centralized database and their own kind of network of databases, right? And that's kind of where the Web 2 flow ends. Facebook can obviously create like little branch off integrations where you can, via your Facebook account, do other things. And that's a little different than what we're talking about. But now you can cover into Web3. And I hope this like concept of composability hammers home, where like the user is represented by a wallet address or a blockchain address, really, and they own assets at that level, right? So they are bringing, you know, this is a logo of Tether, a very popular stablecoin. This is an NFT for a Pudgy Penguin, and they can interact with any of these apps interchangeably, and you know, they can kind of port their assets wherever they want. And these apps are not powered by a centralized entity, rather they are powered by a decentralized network of nodes on the Ethereum blockchain. And these nodes, you know, are where basically the smart contract programs live. So this is like a little bit of a quick contrast of how Web 2 versus Web 3 flows work. You know, it's always just fun to see. And there will be many more apps here and many more other powers that we will be able to build out for users at this level. Like, this is just very cool. The fact that you can bring your account to many different providers and applications, and so on and so on. All right, there's no lock-in, by the way. That's what the table here meant, right? Users are not locked in, so there's composability. You can take your assets and own them elsewhere. All right, so that was like kind of a quick, hey, what is Web3? Why Web3? Why is it cool kind of thing. We have Web3 app development now using Scaffold Alchemy. So let's jump into that. First of all, what is Scaffold Alchemy? I do have the docs pulled up, FYI, if you want to pull them up, alchemy.com/docs/scaffold alchemy. And just like as a quick definition, Scaffold Alchemy is a fork of the popular starter project Scaffold ETH2. Shout out. It is everything you need to build dApps on Ethereum. You can get immediately started with everything kind of packaged together. You have Next.js, TypeScript, Hardhat, Alchemy's account kit, enhanced APIs, and subgraphs. So like everything that is already packaged into Scaffold ETH2 that makes building Web3 dApps a breeze, plus all of the Alchemy goodness and goodies also peppered in, which you'll see will make this a very powerful development flow. All right, so, and we'll cover that more, but basically all you need to do to get started with Scaffold Alchemy is run npx create Web3 dApp at latest in your command line. That'll kick you off into a wizard, and within 1-2 minutes, you are already set with everything. We'll cover kind of everything that you pulled down at that point. All right, so I'm gonna break this kind of presentation up into two parts. One is the features of Scaffold Alchemy, and two is the tech stack powering the tool suite, Scaffold Alchemy. All right, so part one, let's dive into some features. We're going to cover 3 features today, amongst others that will probably come up in the coding portion of this video, but just numbering them off. We have number 1, gasless contract deployments, and I'll explain this. I'll dive into each one very specifically. Number 2, gasless UX. Number 3, tightly integrated dev suite, which means the smart contract deployments and interactions come with hooks. You'll see what that looks like. And there's shared chain configs and utilities. So let's dive into each one specifically. So first of all, like what I'm going to do, by the way, is like dive into gasless contract deployments like one by one by one. I'm going to cover the pain points that each feature of Scaffold Alchemy solves out in like the typical development flow, as if you were writing a Web3 dApp or a Web3 app from scratch without using Scaffold Alchemy, right? Which is, a very typical flow. A lot of people do it. I do it, but we're trying to show people a cooler, more efficient way of doing it. So deploying a smart contract, pain points, right? You're a developer, you are sitting, at your couch or something, watching TV, and you get a really cool idea for a smart contract that you want to write and deploy. So you go to your computer, and this is the typical flow that you have to go through. You have to create a brand new Next.js project, right, on your local. You have to install Hard Hat and any other Web3 specific tools, including any other libraries you might need. You create a .sol file, write a smart contract, right? Or you can use the starter one that Hard Hat starts you off with, no problem. Maybe you just want to deploy a contract just to see. You have to write a deployment script. Again, Hard Hat can't start you off with this, but assuming you're kind of doing this from scratch, you need to create a .env file and load up your private key, which is not the most fun thing to do, and I'll explain why. And then to that .env file, you also need to add API keys. So, kind of first of all, why would you want to add a private key to your .env file? Because someone needs to pay for the deployment costs of that smart contract. Whether it's on testnet or mainnet, someone needs to pay for that smart contract to get deployed to the blockchain. You need to pay the gas fees. So, and just like as a quick note, the .env file is just a file for you to load up kind of environment-wide data or variables that you don't want to kind of hard code into specific files. So that's typically where you would put, API keys and such, and you can kind of just call them from one centralized file. But it's still just not the best thing to do to plug a private key in plain text anywhere. So that's just like a development flow we typically want to avoid. And okay, so number 6, you realize your private key that you went through all the trouble of extracting from your wallet somewhere does not even have the testnet funds. So you have to go to a faucet, right? And faucets are notoriously difficult. You somehow are able to acquire testnet funds, great, to that wallet. Okay, and now you are able to deploy a smart contract. By this point, I know I made this sound painful because it kind of is. I've done this where it's like, I want to just get a smart contract deployed. I'm maybe talking with a fellow employee at Alchemy or a friend, and I'm like, hey, I want you to check this smart contract out. Let me deploy it and send it over or something. It's typically powering some app that I want them to use, and I have to do all this. And by that time, they've gone off to dinner or something. This can take 30 to 40 minutes if or more if you are just kind of starting from scratch. So we want to get people started as soon as possible and avoid all these pain points. So the first feature of Scaffold Alchemy is gasless contract deployments. When you run npx create Web3 dApp at latest in your command line, in your terminal, you get through the wizard. It's just very simple. You just choose a chain, choose a kind of a project name kind of thing. And then you're off to the races. You're actually set up with a sample smart contract, which you'll see in the coding portion. You're set up with a sample smart contract. All you need to do at that point is literally yarn to install the dependencies and hit yarn deploy. And you are off to the races. There's nothing else that you need to do. You can, from running npx create Web3 dApp at latest to running yarn deploy, can literally be a minute to 2 minutes at most, and you're already deployed to any chain of your choice supported by Scaffold Alchemy. In this screenshot, it's shaped Sepolia. So all Dan specifically did here was run yarn deploy, deploying your contract in a user operation. So the way this works is you don't need to go and chase API keys or load funds into test accounts or go get a private key somewhere. The way it works is using account abstraction, we sponsor your transaction. So we sponsor the deployment costs, and you can just like focus on development, right? So, and you are deployed. So you can try that out, by the way. You can try that out right now, and it'll work right out of the gate, assuming it's on testnet. So if it is on mainnet, it will still work. By the way, you'll just need an active mainnet gas policy. So just look out for that. That'll be the only thing that you need to pull into like a .env somewhere. Other than that, super easy. All right. So second feature, I should have numbered these, but these are the pain points for gasless UX now. We're at this point. All right. So the goal when you're writing Web3 apps or apps of any web is that you want to onboard users. That's your goal. So this is notoriously difficult in Web3 because a lot of the apps, especially Web3 enabled apps, have this like wallet connection module, right? So that's not bad at all, but that kind of makes a lot of assumptions, right? For example, number one, user must be knowledgeable about Web3. There's a considerable learning curve. So if I send, Ave to one of my uncles who has never interacted with Web3 technologies before, he's going to have a difficult time, right? Because he'll have to go through the Connect wallet flow from scratch and create a wallet and fund it and etc. So that's already like a big friction point. And then number two, again, like the user must already hold a wallet with funds. Like assuming there's already knowledge there, the user must hold a wallet with funds. And number three, the user must hold funds on the chain specific to where your app is deployed. So maybe you send me an app that is deployed on Base, and I have I have the Web3 knowledge, I have a wallet with funds, but my funds are on Arbitrum. So it's like, oh, now I need to like maybe focus on bridging, or you as a developer need to focus on better abstractions so that more users can use your chain or it's your app, and it's not so chain specific. So these are kind of the main pain points, right? That are addressed by gasless UX. So in Scaffold Alchemy, you'll see as soon as you get set up with like a full stack app with everything working under the hood, and you can just click stuff and it works. It's like I guess it's best described as like a Web 2 flow, right? You just like I'm clicking slideshow and it just works. It just takes me to a slideshow. It doesn't ask me to connect some wallet or add funds somewhere, or it just works. So same for Scaffold Alchemy. Again, it ships out of the box with like a sample project, and it's a very simple one. It's like a smart contract that contains like a counter state variable, and you can increment the counter or decrement it, and you'll notice like it just does it. There's no you can actually see here in the screenshot. You'll see it more in the coding portion, but there's actually 0 ETH in this user's balance, and the transaction's complete. Again, using account abstraction, using gas sponsorship, right? We cover the transactions and let you focus on the development flows, right? On acquiring users, on the hard part with users is more like the marketing and distribution element. You should be focusing on that, not on how once you acquire them, how like to not have them fall off your app because maybe one of these 3 assumptions is not true for all your users. So gasless UX is very important here, and basically Scaffold Alchemy allows you to create gasless UX applications right out of the box, so you don't have to deal with these friction points. Cool. Last one here, related to the features, chaotic dev suites. So this chaotic dev suite pain point slide is related to number 3, the feature called tightly integrated dev suite, right? We have hooks and we have shared chain configs and utilities. let's dive into some of the problems if we didn't have that via Scaffold Alchemy. So like you are writing a project from scratch, you have to manage various .env files, all potentially including sensitive data and different API keys. Maybe you have one for your hard hat and one for your front end, and one for your, your hard hat, your Web3 smart contract side. You also have to manage various config files, right? So your deployment script, your app script, right? Each one has like different, what chain you deployed to, the chain ID, all these things are very manual at that point and very laborious to change around. And once you actually get a contract deployed, great, but everything is still pieced together manually. So every time you deploy a new contract or you're iterating new features on your smart contract, you have to go back, copy the new smart contract address, copy paste it into everywhere that it interacts with, both in the config files and in the main application files. That's one of the most and it becomes very annoying, and you get kind of lost. You're like, oh, was this the old one or is this a new one? And you kind of see like two files containing two different addresses, and obviously you can like fix a lot of this with just having like .envs and stuff like that. But even then, it's like you don't want to be going back to the .env so much where you're changing it every time you deploy a new thing, right? So number 4, once a project is set up on a chain, so like separated to all those pain points that I just mentioned, I've gone through them. They're actually really annoying, and you get lost, and you are so confident, you finally hit deploy, and the deploy says some error that is not specific to, hey, you messed up an address somewhere, right? It says some error like, oh, couldn't deploy, and it, you go into kind of the rabbit hole of figuring that out. Number 4, once a project is set up on a chain, it can be difficult to switch to another chain. This requires, again, more manual changes. So say you are like, blazing through a smart contract that you've developed and deployed on Base, your app is on Base, awesome. And then all of a sudden, for some reason, you want to, again, maybe you want to test the user flow on Arbitrum. So changing that will be, relatively to fairly painful, because again, you need to go back into all the files. You need to like number 5 says, like you need to have testnet funds now on Arbitrum, and you need to potentially load new private keys if you want to pay for that deployment again, and the transactions, and then the all of a sudden your testnet funds ran out because the faucets give, they drip very few testnet funds. So it's just like, it can be chaotic. And we're directly trying to address this via Scaffold Alchemy. So the third feature that I am talking about today is the tightly integrated dev suite. It's very easy. It says here, pick your chain once it's configured everywhere, right? You pick it at the beginning in the wizard flow. In this example, the chain of choice is shape, and it loads up both the mainnet and the testnet immediately. That's also like a whole thing, like going out into Google and searching like, chain IDs and such. It's very annoying. So pick your chain once it's configured everywhere. And I'll even talk about this a little bit more, but also deploy your contracts and access them in your app. So once you deploy a contract, kind of hooks are activated or run so that the new address or the contract that you just deployed is immediately the one that your app is interacting with, right? So there's no need to go back and forth and change, and there's not going to be any differing state. The hooks will take care of that. And all you need to do is focus on deploying smart contracts at this point, right? All you need to do as a developer is just run npx create web3 dApp at latest, write smart contracts to your heart's delight, and deploy them as fast as you can, and the hooks will take care of the rest, right? So it's pretty cool. One thing I did want to say, this comes up a little later. I was just going to say, it'll come up a little later, but to address this like point number 4 about difficulty switching chains, Scaffold Alchemy makes that easy. So if you are, very ahead in development on Base, you can very easily, I think currently the command is just to run npx create web3 dApp at latest again in the command line, and it'll show you this like which chain would you like to use menu. And you can switch to, let's say, Sonium, and all your app config will immediately change to Sonium. And then you just hit yarn deploy, and your app is off to the races on a new chain. Like, that's incredibly fast compared to potentially an hour, 2 hours of doing that in the old flow, of having to change everything manually, of having to load up funds on a new testnet account on a separate chain, et cetera, et cetera. So Scaffold Alchemy makes that incredibly easy. All right, part 2, little time check. All right, I think we were doing okay. Part 2 is a little quicker. It's just like a quick highlight of what we've got, what powers this tool, Scaffold Alchemy. All right, the Web 2 kind of tech stack. We have Next.js, we have TypeScript, we have Tailwind CSS, Daisy UI, and Yarn. And a quick note on Yarn: it's got a great workspace feature, and workspaces make it easier to separate stuff. But you'll see there's a shared one in Scaffold Alchemy, so you can have different dependencies for each one, and some shared, and basically makes it so that Scaffold Alchemy is split into 2. You have the Next.js component or part of the package, or Next.js package really, and then the hard hat part. So it's like the front end and the back end, or the front end and the smart contract side, right? Yarn makes it easy for you to kind of split those up, manage them, share them in a way that is very powerful. Just like a quick note on Yarn, because I don't think we dive into that in the next slides. Daisy UI, I don't think we dive into it either, but it's just like a component library similar to Chakra. If you're familiar with that, Daisy UI is awesome. Tailwind CSS, obviously very powerful in TypeScript. All right, so yeah, you can choose your chain. So like the main thing highlighted here is, of course, like Scaffold Alchemy as a whole. All the things we talked about, just run npx create web3 dApp, you're off to the races. All that is powered by, that sets you up with a packages folder, and you'll see here the first of 2, or the first of the 2 is Hard Hat, which allows you to write contracts, test contracts, deploy contracts, and share the artifacts, which are all, again, via the hooks that are set up via Scaffold Alchemy. All of this is very abstracted, but obviously powered by Hard Hat. The ABI, the bytecode, the addresses in your app. Again, the shared workspace for the chain utilities is very important. You see here, we've now closed the Hard Hat package, all the smart contract stuff, and we have a Next.js package. And again, my bad. So there's 3 packages that this comes out with. This is actually a recent change, so that's why my brain defaulted to 2. It used to be just Hard Hat and Next.js, but now there's a shared folder, which is, again, it's a shared workspace for the chain utilities. And again, as I mentioned, it's a Yarn workspace providing common configuration and utilities for your contracts and app. Makes it really easy to just centralize everything instead of having everything all over the place as per some chaotic development flows. All right, and of course, we've got Alchemy in there. We've got the best of Alchemy account kit primarily. You'll see it's dead easy to sign in to these apps. So like, not only do you ship right out of the box with all of the features that I mentioned, obviously like the gasless UX and stuff, like the account kit is not separate to that. It's the features that I mentioned is because of things like account kit, right? Like you are able to sign in via email. You're able to sign in via X and Discord even. And you, after a brief, the modal that comes up with like Google and stuff, you're signed in and you have an account, right? So you can log in through familiar methods, email, passkey, OAuth. You get access to a smart account immediately, and you send transactions gaslessly, right? This is kind of the backbone of that gasless UX feature. That's very, very important for onboarding users, by the way. We have the enhanced APIs provided by Alchemy, right? If you want to do anything with NFTs, ERC20s, tokens, all the APIs, right? Prices, transfers, token, NFT. You have like the core namespace to access those with like get tokens for owner. If you're doing kind of more Web3 specific stuff like crypto stuff, and you're building an NFT gallery or a token indexer or some sort of consumer for these types of like heavier APIs that live more in blockchain land, Alchemy's got your back with these enhanced APIs. And cool. So that's it for the tech stack. Obviously, happy to check out if there's any questions in the chat or anything. But now let's maybe see some Scaffold Alchemy in action. Dan, are you around?
Yes, sir. All right. Great job, Al. I'll go ahead and present now, and we'll take a look at Scaffold Alchemy. So let me go ahead, share my screen.
All right. You got this, Dan.
Cool. Here we go. All right. So we'll jump right in. So just like Al said, all you really got to do, I always have, like, I do so many demos that I put a repository folder called temp repos on my desktop where I store everything that I could eventually just delete, but I'm just playing around with them. So when you're ready to create an app, you could say npx create web3 dApp. If you want to make sure that you're getting the latest version and it's not cached, you can say add latest. For me, it always grabs the latest without at latest, so I haven't seen it not do that. So just something out there. What is your project name? We can name it whatever, but this is going to be our demo. So let's go with demo. And then you can pick your chain. And I'll show in a minute, just like Al said, how you could switch between the chains. So if you're in the middle of development and you decide, oh, I want to switch to a different chain, I want to try it out there. I want to see if the block speeds are faster. I want to see if I can also deploy to the second chain or this third chain, fourth chain. You want to be everywhere. You can switch that during your development process. So let me go ahead and just use shape there. And I'm going to open it up. So let's call demo. This is going to open up in cursor. And we'll jump right into it. So the first thing that Al said that we have to do when we're inside of a new create Web3 dApp Scaffold Alchemy repository is we run yarn. This is going to go ahead and install the dependencies. And you can see how fast my internet is. It's looking pretty good. So I don't have to stall for too long. In the meantime, I'll open the packages folder. And like Al said, there are 3 packages. I think the shared package is actually going to end up back in Next.js for deployment reasons. It becomes easier to move that back in there. So you may see the shared folder move back in there over the next PR or 2. But don't worry, regardless, there's going to be one place that your chain is going to be configured. This is what Al was showing inside of the shared package here on the source. You go into CW3 dconfig, and if you chose shape mainnet here, you're going to see that it has not only the testnet, but also the mainnet configuration. So when you want to deploy to mainnet, you can go ahead and just say deploy to mainnet. And automatically when you deploy this to Vercel, when you push this out to production and the node environment is production, it's going to choose mainnet over testnet. So that makes it super easy. So you don't have to go back and figure out what the chain IDs are or anything like that. Once you say in the CLI, this is the chain that I want to use, that's what it's going to do. So if I was going to change this, actually there's just a command, and I'll clear this out here. You could just say yarn chain, and yarn chain is going to allow you to go ahead and change it. So if I wanted to move over to, let's say, monad, it's going to do it right here. And you can see it updated in one spot. This is automatically going to update it for Hardhat and Next.js. So I can immediately start deploying things out to monad or whichever one I want to use. I believe, and we'll check it over here. Let me get my Windows set up. Cool. I believe I have my gas policy already set here for shape mainnet. So I'm going to switch back to that one, but I'll show you what it's like when we switch between testnet and mainnet to see that development flow. So let's just go ahead and switch back, and we're going to deploy our first contract on shape. So like Al said, when you're first deploying on testnet, you don't have to worry about setting up any environmental variables. And that's because we have some default environmental variables in here for you. So if you don't choose the gas policy and an API key, these ones are going to be the default. They're on a free tier account. So if a lot of people start using the API key, it will hit the free tier limits. So if you notice that it's hitting the limits, if you're getting those limit messages saying, hey, this has reached its limit, just set your own API key. You can totally do this on a free tier and be able to use that from there. So it may be an extra step if everyone's using it. Same with the gas policy. This one is useful if you want to use it for test nets. Any test nets, it will allow you to deploy to it, and we will sponsor the gas for you via this gas policy ID. So what that does is you can just say yarn deploy, like I was saying, and this is going to go ahead and deploy a smart contract. Now, what smart contract is that? We can actually go over to our packages Hardhat, take a look at the contracts. This is the one that Al was talking about, a very simple counter contract. You can see it's setting a variable X, and then it has an increment and decrement to add to this state variable. We just want to see some state change. And you can see already we have deployed a smart contract. You can see where it's deployed to. And if you don't believe me, we can go pop up the block explorer. Sometimes it'll populate the block explorer down here if it knows what it is. Otherwise, you got to go find it yourself, which I can do over here. So if we go to Sepolia shape, and then put this transaction in here, you can see this is actually already happening on chain, right? That's super quick to get on chain from a development flow. I know that all those pain points that Al talked about, yeah, I feel like I've been through them 100 times, right? And you're starting a new project and you're really excited. You just want to get going. You're like, this project is going to be the one. It's going to be the one that everyone uses. I'm super excited about it. And then you realize you're like 12 steps away from even getting something, a state change, right? Even getting your smart contract deployed. That could be very defeating, but here you do it really quickly, right? Whatever chain you want to deploy to, you deploy to the testnet immediately. And then if you want to be able to play with that smart contract, you could just run yarn start. And this will take a moment too. This is going to spin up the Next.js at this local host. I chose a pretty unique port here. So hopefully it doesn't conflict with any other processes that you might be running. The importance here is that for the default gas policy that I put in here for the account config, it is actually going to redirect you if you sign in with email back to this localhost 56900. You'll see that if you come over to the account config, so I'll just refresh this. I have this over here. When you go to configure a smart wallet on Alchemy, if you come out to the dashboard in Alchemy and you click on smart wallets, this is the specific config that I want to check out. You'll have to specify a redirect URL. And you can see I put it here to 56900, just trying to use one that hopefully is not one that you've already used. It's unique enough so that way we can like specify it as a redirect URL to send you back in case you want to like sign in via email. But if you're signing in via one-time password or a social login, you won't have to worry about that as much, although you do have to add this whitelisted origin as well. So that's just a heads up on that. In the meantime, this should be about ready. So we can go ahead and click this and check this application out. And hopefully we will see the app load up with our counter that should have initialized the count to 3, and we could start playing around with it. So we'll get that in a moment. All right. So sometimes this can happen. Hopefully by the time you get this application, you won't see this error. I meant to clear this out. Sometimes if you're switching between chains, the local storage and the cookies can actually get cached between the different chains. So if you do see that error, just clear your cookies in the application local storage. It won't happen on the first time that you actually run this application, and I am going to get that fixed. So hopefully you won't see that error, but it's a good thing to take note of for the moment. So first time that you're loading up the application, you'll see this, log in and do stuff on chain, and then you can go ahead and click here, log in. And then this is going to give us our counter contract, and we can start to play around with it. So we can increment it, and we'll give that a moment. And we could see once this comes through, we'll be able to see this transaction on chain. You can see the counter is already reflected with 4. So we incremented it to 4. Here's the transaction that went through. And like I was saying, this is also gasless for your user, right? Not only is it a pain to get testnet ETH for your smart contracts when you're deploying them, from the development side, but also for the user to go ahead and do that. But here we didn't have to do that, right? Because we're just going ahead and using that gas policy on testnet. So if we wanted to change our contract, what we could do is we could come back over to our contract, and you could see how easy it is to deploy a new one and start testing it. Maybe we want to make it, instead of x++, we want to make it x plus equals 2. And maybe we want to add a new function called zero it out or something, right? And we just want to set x is equal to 0. So we got 2 new functionalities here. And we want to go ahead and redeploy this. All we have to do, again, is just yarn deploy. What this is going to do, and you might have taken note of this in the console down here, is it deploys it in a user operation, which is using account abstraction beneath the hood, 4337 account abstraction. We have some awesome videos on that if you want to check them out on our Alchemy YouTube channel and on Alchemy University. But what it also does is it updates this contract definition file. This is what Al was talking about when he meant the tightly integrated development suite. you can see what's actually happening here is when you click on this, it's actually already creating a TypeScript object defining what our smart contract is. It's defining where the smart contract got deployed to, but also the ABI. So everything that the front end needs to know in order to be able to interact with your contract, right? So that's the constructor, what arguments does it take? It's the function decrement and increment, but it's also this new function down here, zero it out, right, that we just added. So that's now actually going to come into our application. It's actually already out there because we were having this hot reload. So if we go back over to our contract now, you can see it's back at 3. If we increment this time, we expect it to go to 5. So I'll give that just a moment and we'll see it hopefully pop up to 5. And you can see it did because now we're doing x plus equal 2. If you have not already wired up a button, which we will do in a moment, and you want to go ahead and like play with your new contract function, you can come over to debug contracts here and you could try zero it out. So if we want to set it back to 0, you could just try that new function. This is automatically going to create all the functions for you, just like it does in Scaffold E2. So you'll see that we set back x to 0. And we come back over here, we could increment and decrement, but maybe even more interesting would be to add the new button to zero it out. So in the meantime, I'll set it to 2 just so that we have a way to test that zero out is working. So let's go back over to our functionality. So if we're looking for the counter, it's actually in a function called counter UI here. So this counter UI is everything that you see right here, right? So if you're building a new UI, and the suggestion, by the way, in case it's not clear, for Scaffold Alchemy is for you to just take this application and rip all the components out that you don't want, right? So if you don't want the logo up here, you don't want the home page, create new pages, create whatever you want, rip everything out that's not useful and start building your application, right? That's how you're supposed to build it. So what we're trying to show you here with the counter UI is to actually start just messing around with the UI. So if you wanted to add a new button to increment and decrement called zero it out, you could do so, right? You just sort of do a new button down here. We're going to call it zero it out. You notice that AI is smart enough. It picked up on that. It already knows I want to create a handle zero it out. Let's go ahead and create that function, handle zero it out. It's going to use, now let's go ahead and do everything. It's going to use these hooks that Al was talking about. In the next episode of this Web3 application development, we're going to dive deeper into these hooks to understand the differences between them and how you use them and get really deep into them. But for the moment, you could just know that this contract or that this hook is hooked up here. You can see that for the right contract side, we're specifying the contract name, and it can go find that contract name inside of the TypeScript deployment, right? So when you go deploy a new contract, this is actually going to go ahead and look it up there, and it also will do the TypeScript definition. So if you type in the wrong method name or if you pass in the wrong arguments, it'll give you a TypeScript warning saying, hey, that's not a function that you can use, right? So that's super nice. So we have these hooks here, Scaffold write contract and Scaffold read contract, just like Scaffold Ether 2, where you can go ahead and start messing around with these functions. So if I save that, we should now have a new button wired up to this handle zeroed out, which should call the function name zeroed out on the function or on the contract. So if we come back over here and we want to zero it out, it's as easy as clicking that button, right, to zero it out. So let's see how that does it. And we zeroed it out. Awesome. So that's how easy it is. Again, when you're ready, you can just start taking apart the entire page and just start adding all the methods that you need to build your application. And it's just that easy. So the final thing that I want to show you is how to switch chains and move to mainnet. So like Al was saying in his presentation, for testnet, you could just start deploying with our default keys in there as you will. And you're going to see that up here, it's going to say shape Sepolia. But when you want to move to mainnet, then you actually need to go and configure a gas policy because you're going to pay for the gas contract costs. You can pay for them through the billing on your Alchemy account. So when you're ready to move to mainnet, you can go ahead and set up a gas policy yourself over here. So if you would like to do that, then you can follow these steps. This is what you'll do. So what we'll do next is we'll move over to our mainnet. So one thing that we need to do in order to move over to mainnet first is set up our environmental variables, as Al was saying. So if you come up here to the top root level, there's a .env.example. You can go ahead and copy this and create this as a .env. And this is going to be all the environmental variables that you necessarily need. It's going to be your API key and your gas policy. And just to keep things simple and moving along here, you can always come out, by the way, to docs.alchemy, and you can go look for Scaffold Alchemy to see how to go through and set up all the different environmental variables. So when you're ready to do that, you can go through this whole process and it will teach you how to do it. But in the meantime, what I did is I just already went ahead and created an app, and I've created an account config, and I've created a gas policy just to keep things really smooth for us. So the first thing that you'll need is an API key. And we'll go ahead and set up this API key right here. So this one is configured to work with any EVM network. So all the EVM networks are enabled here. The next thing that I did is I hooked up an account config. So when you come over to wallets and you go to smart wallets, you can create a new account config. This is going to define how your account for your user worked, right? So when we were over here and we were clicking login and we got that pop-up where we could like sign in with Google or sign in with any other OAuth provider or sign in with email, one-time password, any of that stuff is going to be configured here. And just lost the page. So let's see if that will come back real quick. But here is where you can configure that. You could say, this is how I want the user interaction to work when they are signing in. So if you want to configure your email, if you want to configure the redirect URL, the support URL, the different social providers that you might use to allow them to log in, you need to set one of these. And then configure it to your app. And the final thing that you need is a gas policy. Again, when you're going to mainnet, you need to specify like who can use this gas policy and for what. And then once you have one, then you can go ahead and just bring this on over here and set your gas policy. And when you do, you can go ahead and start deploying to mainnet. So that's what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and say yarn deploy mainnet. And that's just going to go ahead and immediately go sending that through. So now you can see it immediately knows to go to shape mainnet. That's because it knows what you mean by mainnet because you're talking about shape. So if you were on base, you'd be deploying to base testnet by default and then base mainnet once you click that yarn deploy mainnet. And it already did that. So now we're on mainnet. Look at that. You can see if we come over here, we should have sponsored another operation. So I think it already did say 3. I had 2 in there before because I was testing a little bit earlier today. This one has gone through. So that's my 3rd user operation. And if we go ahead and test this out, we can go to maybe this transaction on not shape Sepolia, but the actual shape scan. And we could just test this out. Oh, that's not the URL. What is it? Let's do shape block explorer. There it is, shapescan.xyz. That's what I thought I had, but and then we'll do /tx. And you could see it in here. Here's the transaction, right? And it went through the 4337 entry point. That's common for our account abstraction that we're using here. Cool. So this was already on chain. So this address is already out there. If we want to use this in our application, you can just go ahead and deploy this application. We're going to go over that in the next episode when we deploy this out to Vercel and how you need to set that up. Or one thing that I did here to make it a little bit easier is if you want to test this locally, you can go to Next.js and there's this environmental variable in here. You'll notice that the way this is set up is if the node environment is set to production, when you're deploying this out there, if it's not development, then it's going to automatically switch from your testnet chain ID to the mainnet chain ID. So it sort of already knows to do that, right? You go set your node environment to production, which for a lot of providers, that's what it's set to default when you push it out there. Or you can just go ahead and use this variable in case you want to simulate prod in your local environment. So that's what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to create a environmental variable in my Next.js package and just say true. And this is going to go ahead and set us up for prod. And because we are now pointing out shape mainnet, we should have a counter that's set to 3. And we're going to be start making transactions on the mainnet here. Again, hopefully this error is gone by the time that you guys go to use the application. This is what I'm working on at the moment. When you switch between chains, unfortunately, some of this stuff doesn't get cleared out. So you could either log out when you're going to switch chains, or you can just clear your local storage and your cookies there, and then this will go away. But hopefully soon that will not be a problem. Again, if you were going to deploy locally and then you deploy to mainnet, you actually wouldn't run into that because you're not switching chains locally. But when you do switch chains locally, right now there's a little bit of an issue there, which will get fixed up very shortly. Cool. So let's go ahead and sign into Shape mainnet here. And so now we should see not Shape testnet, not Shape Sepolia, but Shape up here, right? So now we're actually on the mainnet. We could do all the things that we could do before. We could increment. An increment, because we haven't changed our contract in a little bit, is still x plus equals 2. So we should be going up to 5 here. So when we go check out that transaction, you'll notice this is actually on mainnet. How easy was that, right? We're already doing stuff on mainnet. We're out there. We're doing it. These are real transactions, right? Out on the Shape mainnet. So we can go ahead and decrement, and maybe we'll do one more zero it out just to see how that works too. Pop that through. And yeah, there we go. All right, cool. So that's how easy it is to get started, not only in the testnet. If you don't even want to like configure your environmental variables, you just want to get going and deploying. But also for mainnet, when you're ready to go, you just sort of make that switch. You put in your gas policy, your API key, and then you push to production and automatically detect it, or you can simulate production. So hopefully that was a really informative episode 1. For episode 2, like I said, we're going to be going into the different hooks, how you should be using them, the best practices, especially for deploying to mainnet, and many more things to come in that episode. So hope you guys stick with us and check that one out. In the meantime, at this point, this is a good time for taking some questions. So if you do have any questions, we're happy to take them. I'm going to take a look through the comments. Al, did you see anything here that, oh, we add you back? There you are. Cool. You see anything here that we, Talon says she loves that Shape's mainnet chain is 360. That is a good chain ID. Yeah, I like that one. There's some really cool chain IDs out there. 360 is a good one.
I think Samuel is asking for the repo link. Unfortunately, I can't share links in this chat. Not sure if you can, Dan, as an admin. But Samuel, if you just go to alchemy.com/docs/scaffold-alchemy, the GitHub repo for Scaffold Alchemy is in there in the docs. So feel free to check it out, fork it, star it, do all the good things.
Let's see if I can add that.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
And yeah, Dan, great job. You got onto mainnet via your local host, but how does that feel?
Good, man. I mean, it's kind of crazy how easy it is, in that development to be on chain now on mainnet. It's like, I don't know. I just remember like setting up an application for like several days when we were doing chain shop back in the day. Like, it'd be like, okay, day 1, we're going to connect to, a Web3 provider, and we're going to talk about like how to even set that up. And yeah, I feel like it was like 4 or 5 days worth of lessons to get on chain. And here it's like kind of surreal. You're just pressing a button and mainnet transactions, right? It's pretty cool.
Yeah, great point. I do remember that. It's a little surreal actually how Web3 development has evolved to the pinnacle, Scaffold Alchemy, and it'll only keep getting better. But yeah, I mean, Rory is saying this was harder in trouble. Yeah, it was. But the good old days, yeah. And I just wonder how I mean, someone starting back then, right? We would kind of extract everything to a base point and like really hammer it home, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then put it all together. And just very interesting to see people starting off their journey kind of with these kind of full packaged flows where they can kind of work backwards a little bit or work forwards, and a lot of this is abstracted and not necessarily like core knowledge, and they can just build amazing apps. But it's funny to see you present, and thanks for relating. I think a lot of people relate to the pain points because we've all actually run into them, and they are the worst. It's I think you mentioned the word I think like you mentioned demoralizing or something like that. And yeah, you just sometimes you just want to develop, especially by the way, for hackathons. I don't think we mentioned that this is a great tool for hackathons, just to get up and running. Hackathons are like time boxed instances, right? You have 24 hours, you have 12 hours. I've been in a hackathon in the old days prior to tools like Scaffold Alchemy, where we burnt so much time in the setup of all the tools and so much time in maintaining all the chaos of the dev flows, etc. But yeah, great job, Dan, and awesome stuff getting to mainnet there.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's it. It is. I thought your pain points were super well thought out. As you were going through it, I was getting more excited for Scaffold Alchemy. As you were doing it, I was like, oh yeah, wow, it was a lot harder. You had like 10 steps that are condensed down into one, which is just super, super nice. And yeah, for hackathons, one thing I forgot to mention too for episode 3 is we'll be showing you how to put a LLM's text into your repository. It's not too complicated. We just have an LLM's text up on our docs. You can download it, and then you just sort of put it into your repository, and then boom, AI will know how to interact with Scaffold Alchemy with all the latest and greatest issues. So if there's any issues that your AI runs into, that's our fault. We got to fix the docs. Let us know. We will definitely fix those. But hopefully we're training the AI to help it make it easier to build Scaffold Alchemy projects. And then you could even just, hackathons are just like vibe coding then, right? we're more the idea people at that point.
Go win a bunch
Although
of prizes.
I still think Web3 application development is still tough enough where, you got to know what's happening, right? Which is the advantage of knowing the behind the scenes. But it is getting much easier. It could get to the point where for a Web2 developer, they don't really have to know too much, right? They just have to like get in there and understand like, oh, okay, transactions being sent, state changed, done, right? We did it.
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Web2 flow, because I come, you know this, you taught me this. Like I learned software development kind of more in the Web3 side of things, and like for a Web2 developer, they don't have to like know the core workings of like AWS. They just know, okay, this link stores a lot of things for me, or this allows me to do a lot of the things, and they can just like go and do their specific use cases. So very similar here. Like I think that's potentially what we're going for. Like, okay, this tool allows me to do a bunch of things. This tool allows me to do gasless UX. This tool allows me to do to not have a chaotic dev suite. This tool allows I forgot the first feature. I'm gonna go look at it. I taught this and now I forget. But gasless contract deployments. Yeah, and then one final thing is when you're doing this in like the native flows, and then the faucets, I did mention like they drip so little, so like you have to be really careful with your iterations, and your creative flow gets cut off because it's like, ooh, do I deploy this and test this out? And because I'm going to run out of testnet funds. So that is a completely eliminated problem now, thanks to Scaffold Alchemy and amongst many others.
It's so funny. Like I felt like when we were doing testnet stuff and you have like a little bit of testnet funds, you start to get really like, at first you're like, yeah, I'll spend half an ETH on this contract deployment. You don't care. I have so much testnet ETH. And then eventually you're like, I don't want to have to go back to the faucet. And you become you're very tight on your testnet ether, which is funny.
And you go back to the faucet if you do, and it's like, oh, you like once every 24 hours, pal.
Yeah, come back tomorrow.
Like you come back at that point, it's like, like I was so inspired to do this. I've gone to the point where I tweet out at like 3 a.m. like, someone please fund this.
Yeah, people know your pain and they're like, I got you.
Yeah.
Talon Dragon asks if there's any plans for a Foundry option. It is on the roadmap, I suppose. This vague, ambiguous roadmap. The more people ask about it, the more likely it'll happen at some point. It's just the integration for all the generic chain stuff does make it a little bit more complicated. So I think more people ask about it, the more likely it'll happen. Maybe more likely it'll be like a hard hat Foundry hybrid using both, where hard hat does like all the exporting, but Foundry can help you with the unit testing. So not at the moment, but down the line, possibly. What else we got? Talon Dragon also asks, are the different log methods still separated? So if we log in different addresses, yes, that's true. So if you log in, and this is also important to know that if you log in on a different application, you're going to get a different address there. So the address that you logged in, that you saw me log in with here, was actually the same for Shape mainnet and Shape testnet, but it's different per app and per login method. So if you're using Google, or if you're using email, or if you're using a different application, you'll get a different address each time, which for now is a little bit of a pain point if you want to have funds on the account. So if you're buying something and you want users to like pay for something, like if you were going to do Scaffold Alchemy because you wanted to build a coffee shop, there is still a pain point for users to have to on-ramp onto the application. So that's still something in there. And we'd like to, in the future, talk about that pathway as well and potentially make that easier. But for the moment, that's, still there. We got another one from Talon Dragon. Oh, make account linking. Not as far as I know, but I will bring that to the team that knows a lot more about the product. Maybe if it's like the same email as your Gmail, maybe you could do something there. I don't know. That part's a little beyond me. Cool. Do we get any other? Everyone's late to the party. Cool. I see a lot of people. But yeah, everyone, thank you for attending this first episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Al, any parting words?
No, thanks. That was so fun. That was so much fun. Check back in for stay tuned for I think video 2 of the lesson. And I think Dan, this is our part to wrap send off, right?
I don't think I have any rhymes today.
All right, we'll save that for video 2. And we had a lot of fun. Thanks, Dan. And I think video 2, should we say kind of stay tuned for next week, right?
Yeah. We'll see if it's next week. It'll be coming soon. So
Okay.
we'll see you guys soon. Take care, everybody.
Take care, everybody. Thanks. Bye-bye.